It's been 32 days since Lex Luthor was released from prison after 17 years serving time for a crime he didn't commit. Since then, no one has heard from him and Superman has been unable to find him. After all the challenges his family has faced over the last year, now that Lois has finally been cured of cancer, Clark decides to take his wife and children on a trip. The family will be spending a few days in Italy, at Uncle Tal's house, and the young men are excited about the news. That afternoon, Lois goes into her office with her husband and finds Chrissy. Noticing her partner's strange behavior, Lois asks her what she's hiding and the woman reveals that she's pregnant. Upon receiving the news, Lois celebrates the beginning of a new phase in Chrissy's life, but Clark is distracted and doesn't react. The man has just heard the news that Judge Regan was eliminated that morning. Immediately, the couple walks to the alley where the victim's body was found and Clark begins to name some suspects. However, Lois is convinced that Luthor is behind the attack on the judge and has done so to send a message to the journalist. According to her, the villain's goal is to get revenge on everyone who put him in jail, and Regan was the first to be eliminated, since she was the one who convicted him. However, Clark tries to reassure his wife and says that nothing bad will happen to Lois because both he and her father will always be around to protect her. That afternoon, Jonathan and Jordan meet their grandfather's new girlfriend and discover that John Henry and Natalie may be moving to Metropolis to create more technology for the Department of Defense. When they receive this news, Clark and Lois are surprised, especially when they discover that Sam met Cheryl on a dating app. Over dinner, the family talks about their trip to Italy and, instead of spending money on plane tickets, Clark suggests that he and Jordan use their powers to take the whole family to Europe. This way, as well as saving money, they'll also save travel time, since Superman and his son can fly much faster than an airplane. When he hears this, Jordan is upset because his parents have forbidden him to use his abilities to save people. Instead of using his talents to be a superhero, the young man is only allowed to use them on a family trip, and this leaves him deeply frustrated. Noticing his son's discomfort, Clark says that Jordan will be able to use his powers as soon as he is mature enough not to want to take credit for being a superhero. As the young man has already tried to use his powers to attract attention, Clark is afraid that people will discover his true identity, as this will be irreversible. However, when helping people and making a difference in the world is Jordan's real motivation, he will be allowed to use his powers. Just then, Sam is walking through the city with Cheryl and receives a call from Natalie. However, when the man picks up his cell phone to answer it, his girlfriend drags him into an alley and suddenly the couple are surprised by the arrival of Otis. Seeing this unknown man approaching, Sam immediately asks what he's looking for and ends up being attacked by Cheryl, who uses a stun gun to put him out. After leaving the restaurant, Clark and Lois find Natalie, and the young woman reveals that she arranged to meet Sam and his girlfriend 20 minutes ago, but they have disappeared. Hearing this, Lois begins to worry and calls her father, but no one answers. Through his long-range hearing, Clark discovers that his cell phone is in an alley, and Lois comes to the conclusion that Luthor has sent someone to capture him. While Superman is out looking for his father-in-law, Luthor orders one of his henchmen to feed the monster he is creating in his hideout. The villain is working on an evil plan to eliminate Superman, because when that happens, Lois will be vulnerable. 33 days earlier, Luthor was walking through the abandoned subway looking for a place to hide when he came across Bizarro. The Superman clone was living in a deplorable state, feeding on rats to survive. Seeing the two men breaking into his house, Bizarro attacks Otis and tries to devour him, but the attack is interrupted by Luthor, who uses a laser gun to drive him away. After a few shots, the creature is eliminated, but Luthor soon realizes that no matter how many times he is destroyed, Bizarro will always return even stronger. So the villain decides to imprison him and makes a deal with him. Luthor's plan is to cause Bizarro to be eliminated countless times so that he becomes stronger and stronger and becomes invincible. In the weeks that followed, Luthor devoted his days to attacking and eliminating Bizarro in the most painful ways possible. Thanks to this, the monster became infinitely stronger, so that nothing else could destroy it. That night, Luthor goes to meet Superman to explain the reason for his revenge. Years ago, when he was unjustly imprisoned, he told Lois Lane that he was innocent, but she never believed him. Suddenly, a creature lands on top of the barn and the superhero has to face the monster alone. The problem is that Bizarro is now more powerful than ever, and, after hitting Superman with all his might, he throws him towards the city. During the battle, Clark sees the desperation in the eyes of his friends and family, who rush to his aid. However, Superman knows that this is one of the most dangerous things he has ever faced, and he doesn't want to risk the lives of the people he loves. So he orders everyone to stay away and takes Bizarro into battle in the sky. After exchanging a few punches, the monster throws Superman into the ocean and tries to leave him breathless, but the superhero uses his freezing breath to petrify the creature. Seeing Bizarro about to break free, Superman flies over the city with his enemy in his arms and pierces his body with the top of a tower. As Clark begins to believe that he has defeated his enemy, Bizarro's heart starts beating again and, after freeing himself, he launches a new attack. The monster takes Superman into the city's subway and pushes his body against the concrete structures. When he finally manages to get up and tries to fight back, The superhero is punched in the jaw and can no longer get up. At that moment, Bizarro approaches and punches his enemy in the chest and, when Superman is unconscious, the creature takes him into space. During the flight, Clark regains consciousness and gathers all the strength left in his body to fight back, because he knows that if Bizarro survives, his family will be in danger. Superman then kicks his opponent to the moon so that they can continue their duel without compromising the safety of humanity. While the battle rages miles away, Lois and her children return home and Jordan uses his powers to put out the barn fire. The young man then tries to hear his grandfather's voice, as his priority at the moment is to find him. Meanwhile, Lois uses the locator to try to contact her husband, but Clark is busy trying to defeat the creature. This is one of the few times that Superman has actually felt afraid of his enemy, but even so, he refuses to give up the battle. For a few days, the superhero keeps himself busy in a never-ending battle, as he is facing an immortal opponent. In an attempt to help Jordan find his father, Lois goes to the office where she works and is surprised by Luthor's arrival. The villain refuses to reveal Sam's location and reveals that he is moving to Smallville to keep an eye on the journalist. After a few days of trying to listen to his grandfather and failing miserably, Jordan begins to feel guilty about his disappearance. After all, it was the young man who introduced the dating app to his grandfather. After talking to Lois, Luthor calls Cheryl and orders her to eliminate Sam with a shot to the head and another to the heart. At the end of the call, the woman grabs her gun and Sam tries to convince her not to follow Luthor's orders. The general says he can help Cheryl start a new life, with a new name and a new identity. However, the woman knows that no one can hide from Luthor, so she kisses Sam goodbye. However, just as she was about to shoot, the man manages to free himself from the restraints and disarms his opponent. After being hit, Cheryl faints and Sam manages to free himself. After destroying the lock and opening the door, Sam is attacked by Otis and collapses. That night, with Cheryl's help, the man chooses a place to bury the general still alive and, after breaking the news about Superman's disappearance, Luthor pushes Sam into his grave. Despite not being able to hear his grandfather, Jordan hears Cheryl's voice and Lois orders her son to take her to her. While the young man gets rid of Otis, Lois attacks the woman and discovers the location of her father. When he discovers that his grandfather has been buried, Jordan immediately goes after him and manages to free him in time. Immediately, Lois takes her father to the hospital and Luthor's henchmen go after him to warn him about what has happened. Worried about her husband, Lois vents to her father about the whirlwind of emotions she has been facing since Clark disappeared. Even after several days of battle, Superman doesn't give up on his goal of eliminating Bizarro, because just the thought of losing his family terrifies him. Then, after being thrown against the rock, the superhero gathers all his power in his eyes and turns it into a heat source to set his enemy on fire. However, Bizarro once again manages to survive the attack and crushes Superman with his fist. After defeating his adversary, Bizarro returns to Earth and takes Clark's body so that the humans will know that their savior has been destroyed forever. On seeing her husband's body, Lois panics and has to deal with her immense grief while trying to console her children. While the family mourns the loss of Clark, Bizarro follows his orders and takes Superman's heart to Luthor. Desperate, Lois orders Jordan to take his father to the fortress so that his mother can try to find a way to bring him back. After analyzing her son's condition, Lara states that she will do her best to save him with her Kryptonian technology, but says that this will be an extremely difficult task, as Superman's body is unable to recreate organs that have been lost. Upon returning home, Jordan begins to think of ways to win back his father's heart, as he knows this is his best chance of bringing him back. However, the young man decides not to share his plan with his mother, as he doesn't want to worry her. So he asks his brother to help him find out where the organ is and Jonathan says that Luthor must have it. That morning, Jordan puts on his Superboy costume and goes to meet Luthor. When he meets him, the young man threatens the villain to try to force him to return his father's heart, but Luthor soon realizes that he is hesitating and refuses to meet his demands. The man advises the young man to be ready to eliminate him the next time they meet and, upon hearing this, Jordan leaves. That night, the young man is frustrated at having failed in his mission, but suddenly he hears his father's heartbeat and decides to go after it. Despite his brother's insistence that he not take too many risks, Jordan decides to do what he believes is right, even though he knows he could be walking into a trap. Just then, Jonathan receives a call from Sarah and the young woman reveals that Luthor is at the diner, so this is the perfect chance for the young man to break into the hotel where he is living to look for the heart. However, when Sarah goes away to talk to her mother, Luthor disappears and the young woman tries to warn Jonathan to leave the hotel. Meanwhile, Jordan finally manages to reach the place where his father's heart is supposed to be, but discovers that he has followed a false lead. Suddenly, 4 men armed with kryptonite pistols appear and attack Jordan, but the young man manages to get up and walks towards them. However, before the young man could attack his enemies, he was thrown into a container and collapsed. Seconds later, when he wakes up, Jordan easily knocks those guys out, but Luthor appears soon after and uses a high-pitched sound to weaken him. When the young man is too weak to get up, the villain shows him Superman's heart and crushes it right in front of him. As Jordan screams in despair, Luther leaves and the young man returns home to tell his mother the news. That night, he takes Lois and Jonathan to say goodbye to Clark. Now that all chances of saving Superman have been exhausted, the family realizes that it's time to say goodbye properly and discovers that Clark has left a recorded message for them. After the fortress was built, the superhero decided to leave a message for his family in case he perished too soon. He tells them that he has uploaded all his knowledge and memories and says that he will always be at the fortress to help them in any way he can. But outside, the three of them will have to protect themselves from now on. Upon returning home, Jordan realizes that his brother is harboring a strong resentment towards him, as he holds him guilty for what happened to his father. Even though he knew there was a good chance he was being lured into a trap, he decided to use his powers to go after the heart in order to prove he was a real superhero. After taking out all his frustrations on his brother, Jordan hits the wall in a burst of rage and injures his fist. At that moment, his superpowers awaken and his X-ray vision is activated along with his ability to heal. Although he still doesn't know how to control his new abilities, Jonathan is delighted to discover that he has superpowers and flies around the farm to test them out. Upon discovering that his favored grandson has developed superpowers, Sam is excited about the possibility of having a new hero to replace Superman and says that, unlike Jordan, Jonathan is a born leader and will therefore be very useful to the Department of Defense. That afternoon, Sam welcomes John and Natalie into his office, as they have agreed to move to Metropolis to work with the Department of Defense. From now on, the pair will be known by their code names, Steel and Starlight. A few minutes later, when he is alone, the general receives a visit from Jones, who is working for Luther. The man reveals that his family is being held prisoner, so he had no choice but to follow the criminal's orders. Through a video call, Luther asks where Elizabeth, his daughter, is, but Sam refuses to give him the information. He then tries to disarm Jones, but ends up being shot in the stomach and his enemy flees. As he is too weak to ask for help, Sam realizes that he will not survive and decides to use on himself the serum that Bruno Mannheim developed to save his wife and which brought Bizarro back to life. Just then, John and Natalie show up and Sam orders them to get all the employees out of there, because Luther will send Bizarro to eliminate him. After evacuating the site, the superhero duo flies towards the monster and Starlight sends 2 missiles to try and blow it up. However, the creature manages to survive and captures John, who is almost crushed inside his own suit. However, Natalie manages to save her father in time and Bizarro flies towards the Department of Defense. When he sees the creature approaching, Sam walks towards it and receives a phone call from Luther trying to force him to change his mind about revealing his daughter's location. However, the general decides to keep his promise to Elizabeth and ends up being eliminated at the hands of Bizarro. Seeing her father lose his life, Lois despairs and begins to cry, but John appears and says that he needs to take Sam's body to the fortress, because before he was eliminated the man gave clear instructions on what should be done after his perishment. The general's plan was to use his own heart to revive Clark. This is possible because Sam used in his own body a serum containing samples of Superman's blood and this blood circulated through his heart before he lost his life. After taking Lois back home, Natalie reveals that Sam has recorded a message for her and, during his farewell speech, he promises that he will always be with his family, as a piece of him will be used to bring Clark back. The next morning, when the heart transfer process is complete, John takes the general's body back to Smallville and Lois has the chance to give her father a proper funeral. Soon after the ceremony, Clark appears and Lois walks into her husband's arms. Then Jordan and Jonathan realize that their father is back and run to hug him, relieved to know that he is alive. A few days later, in an attempt to ensure that Lex Luthor will never be able to hurt any member of her family again, Lois uses her father's tracker to call Bizarro, but ends up attracting the attention of Jonathan, who goes to meet her. On seeing her son, the woman orders him to leave. But the young man refuses to leave her alone and at that moment the monster appears. Lois's goal is to try to convince him to stop the attacks. Despite having turned into a monster, Bizarro still has the essence of Superman. In his world, he was married and had a family, so he knows the pain of losing the people he loves and Lois manages to touch his heart to convince him not to try to destroy her family. After listening to the woman's pleas, Bizarro leaves and abandons Lex Luthor, as he no longer wishes to follow his orders. In an attempt to get his monster back, Luthor steals Steel's armor and makes it even stronger with Milton's help. Worried about the challenges his children will face in the future, Clark decides to train them so that they learn to use their powers as effectively as possible. Despite the limitation of being half-human, Jonathan and Jordan have each other to compensate for their weaknesses and Superman believes that, with teamwork, they can overcome it. When she learns that Luthor is planning to destroy Smallville, Amanda revolts and tries to help him understand that the city's residents don't deserve to suffer because of a rivalry between him and Superman. However, Luthor doesn't take it well when Amanda tries to interfere in his plans and the woman realizes that she's not as important to him as she thought. At the end of the conversation, Luthor puts on his armor and goes to meet Bizarro and convinces him that he has been tricked by Lois. Just then, Superman and his sons hear the monster's screams coming from the mine and Clark orders the young men to find their mother. That afternoon, Lois is working in her office when Amanda appears and warns her of the danger to come. When he arrives at the mine, Superman sees Luthor throwing some explosives at Bizarro and the monster ends up being eliminated once again. But when he returns, he no longer has the same identity because Luthor has attacked him with the aim of turning him into Apocalypse. Seeing him, Lois once again tries to convince the monster to back off, but soon realizes that something inside him is different, as the creature can no longer recognize her. While his father tries to stop the monster, Jordan and Jonathan split up to help the victims and get the people to safety. Worried about Clark, Lois decides to stay on the battlefield and sees her husband about to be eliminated by the same monster once again. Desperate, the woman asks her sons to help her get rid of the thing. So Jonathan and Josh split up to try and lure the monster away from Superman. As soon as the creature moves away, Lois rushes to help her husband up and Clark is furious when he discovers that his children are risking themselves to help him. The superhero knows that the young men aren't ready to deal with this alone, but then John shows up and claims to have a plan. Under orders from their father, Jonathan and Jordan lure the monster to the town's main street and, when Apocalypse tries to hit him, John throws a hammer at him. After being hit, the creature is eliminated, but Superman knows that it could wake up at any moment, so he decides to take the monster to the sun, because he knows that the Earth's sun has the opposite effect on his enemy and will weaken him. When he gets there, Apocalypse wakes up and Clark can see all the pain in his eyes. At that moment, the superhero pushes the monster towards the sun and sees its body disintegrate. Meanwhile, Luthor goes after Amanda and sends a missile to blow up her car, but the woman is saved by Superman's children. Amanda is then taken to Lois' office and does a live broadcast to expose all the crimes committed by Lex Luthor. However, before she could speak, the transmission system was knocked out by Milton and the two brothers were attacked. Seeing Jordan in danger, Lois decides to act and approaches Luthor with the aim of planting a bomb in his armor. After the explosion, Superman appears and takes his enemy away from his family, but Luthor shoots a kryptonite dart into his body. However, Clark manages to get rid of the dart and flies towards his enemy, unleashing all his fury in a single punch. During the battle, John breaks into the lair where Milton is hiding and manages to capture him. At this point, he forces the hacker to re-establish the transmission signal and Lois rushes to record Amanda's testimony. After destroying Luthor's suit, Superman takes him back to Smallville and hugs his family, relieved that all his enemies have been defeated. A year later, John marries Lana Lang and Lois is asked to be the wedding officiant. After walking his childhood friend down the aisle, Clark joins the other guests to watch the ceremony and, at the end of the party, Lois discovers that Luthor has been sentenced to life imprisonment. Over the next few years, Lois and Clark set up a foundation to help people in need and, little by little, manage to restore hope to the population. Concerned about the legacy he would leave after his perishment, Superman devoted his time to training his children, because he knew that one day they would have to take his place. Time passed quickly and, before he knew it, Clark realized that Jonathan and Jordan had become grown men. Thanks to Sam's sacrifice, the couple had the chance to see their children marry and build their own family. For the last few decades that they were able to enjoy together, Lois and Clark never spent a day apart and lived the most magical time of their lives. However, when Lois reached old age, her cancer returned and, this time, she couldn't resist. After losing the love of his life, Clark was never the same and, despite the constant presence of his friends and family, Superman felt lonely. So the superhero decided to adopt a dog and named him Krypto. The pair spent a few good years together, but suddenly Clark's heart began to fail him and before long he was gone. However, this time it was very different from when he was eliminated at the hands of Bizarro. After his second perishment, Clark felt an incredible sensation and had the chance to meet Lois Lane again. So what did you think of this series? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more series recaps. See you next time.